Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I am Deb Hellman, your host, and this is the channel where we discuss all things related to education. If this is your first
I'm Deb
time to
Hellman, your
the
host,
channel,
and this is a channel where we discuss all things related to education.
I think
If this is your first time,
we have an echo on the channel. One moment, please.
if this is your first time, we have an echo on the channel. One moment, please.
Dr. Ping, can you turn your sound off?
Dr. Ping, can you turn your sound off?
It's coming through. Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Can you? No, the sound on your computer to the channel. Hello? Dr. Ping, if you had YouTube pulled up, you need to mute YouTube, not this. Can you hear me? It's if you have YouTube open. Well, I'll continue. Hopefully we will resolve this technical issue. So if it is your first time at the channel, I hope you will consider subscribing. I produce content like this with live interviews a couple times a week, as well as original content related to education and what's going on with it and what our kids are and are not getting, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what we can do to improve it, hopefully. So to that end, I've invited Dr. Ping here because he is working on the last bit of that. Dr. Ping grew up in China during the Cultural Revolution. After graduating from college, he went to Canada for his graduate studies in electrical engineering. In 1995, he moved to Indianapolis to work as a senior engineer and later became a U.S. citizen. He became a high school math teacher in 2011 after retiring from engineering and starting to notice problems in America. He started then to notice problems in America's education system. In 2018, he started a nonprofit organization, Poema, I think it's called. Poema Institute. Okay. To research and promote alternative education models. In September 2021, he started a YouTube channel, Taking Back Education, to expose the harms the K-12 schools are doing to their students, similar to what I'm doing, and to help parents take back their children's education. He's also, and I really want you to write this down, he is the author of a book, Our Children Are Not Prepared, and there is a link to the book in the description section where you can purchase it. He also has an article on his Patreon that I think is well worth a read. I've linked to it as well. It's called Education 4.0, Transforming Students to Masters Instead of Slaves. So I hope you will consider reading both of those. In the meantime, everyone, please hit the like button, share this broadcast so we can get more people involved in the conversation, and let's continue. Welcome, Dr. Ping.
Well, thank you for having me on your show.
You're so welcome. So I think one of the questions we Americans all have is, what was it like growing up during the Cultural Revolution for you? That's one of the first questions I have.
Right. Well, during the Cultural Revolution, basically what I felt is, first of all, my dad was put in prison because he was a party official, and Chairman Mao basically overthrew the whole party hierarchy, and also, of course, illegally imprisoned the back then the president of China. So I was kind of in a way traumatized by that experience, because we have to basically get kicked out of our apartment, and we have to move to a countryside and live in a mud house for about a couple of years before my dad was reinstored back to his original position. So, but the other thing I experienced is really something called education revolution. So we started a cultural revolution. Then a couple of years later, during the first 2 years, all school are closed. And then when school opened up, we have to go through this so-called education revolution. And that's where very similar to what we see now in America. So basically all the...
Like the pandemic closed schools for 2 years, and then a little more subtle, but not really.
It's really come down to it's like when I started school when I was about 7. That was a time Like all the old textbooks were destroyed. Basically, everything is new. Um, and so, I mean, it's really focused on indoctrination. Like the first thing we learned is long live Chairman Mao, long live the uh, Chinese Communist Party. So everything is about politics. And we were told to raise our class consciousness, that which means that we have to look uh, our surroundings, our friends, our classmates, our families through the lens of classes. You know, I'm I belong to this class, you belong to that class. So there is a conflict between classes. So it's always about that power struggle, which is what kind of similar what's going on now. Between you know the CRT, the power struggle between the white and black. Um, so that's when I start to hear about uh, critical race theory and diversity, equity, inclusion. That just very familiar to me, and that's actually the time. Actually, is last May I started to do something about it. I started to write articles to basically trying to raise awareness that this had happened before. And we just cannot allow this to happen in our, especially K to 12 schools. And I mean, otherwise we could experience the same thing of what happened in China.
Right. Now, I've always wondered, um, how did they at the time explain, or did they, why school children had to learn different things? Or you mentioned raising class consciousness, you had to do that, but were the parents at the time, um, you know, up in arms and they didn't like it, they just didn't have the power to change it? Or did they think, well, maybe this is good, this sounds okay, I think I like this?
Well, no, actually, the parents were afraid of us because they were afraid that we could report them. Uh, we can report them. We have something called political officers back then in school. You know, just like the DEI officers now in many school districts.
That's
So
what they are.
we could report to them about what our parents said, and then that will get our parents in trouble. Uh,
Right.
yeah. So back then, like we are talking about, there is something called four oaths. Uh, so old thoughts, old, um, sorry, old thoughts, old habits, old costumes, uh, and old culture.
Mhm.
So basically everything before the Communist Party took over China are considered old, and so that those things has to be destroyed and has to be purged. And because our parents were born before that, before the communists took over China, so therefore they have all those old things, and that needs to be purged. So and if we report uh, on our parents, then they will be forced to go through something called re-education. Uh, so uh, it's kind of like in a way like what is happening now in America. If you say something, people think that is, uh, you know, not the right thing to say, then you have to take some kind of training, right? Either cultural, sensitive, or responsive training or something like that. But in China, of course, it can go a lot worse because uh, that could put our parents in prison. So the grown-ups are really kind of scared of us, and also our teachers, because we can report on our teachers too.
Right. And do you see similar things? I mean, you just mentioned about DEI officers and so forth. Do you see the teachers today in the same situation, that some of them are scared
Hmm.
of what's going on? Because I mean, I've spoken to some and they say they're afraid, not so much of going to prison, obviously, but of losing their jobs
Right.
and of just being harassed and called names and so forth. Um, Now, what I also find fascinating, and I wonder if it's just a cultural difference, um, because in the United States we have a history of individual liberty, And it's my understanding that in China, even before Mao, there was more of a sense of duty, more of a duty culture, less of a, my personal individual rights are what come
Right.
first.
Yeah.
Even though you had more rights than when Mao came in, it wasn't quite the same with the Constitution, Bill of Rights, etc. And so what I'm wondering is, are they doing exactly the same things, but using those freedoms and, like freedom of speech, for example, and twisting words around and calling things nice things that sound good to basically implement Maoism? I mean, implement the same concepts, but in a culture where people would be naturally resistant to someone coming in and saying, literally everything old is bad and rat out your parents. Like, they couldn't come in and directly say these things in our culture because that'd be turning the heat up too fast. But it seems like, I wonder if they've learned from Mao's Cultural Revolution and said, okay, we have to do it a little differently. We have to be a little sneakier. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah.
Is they're doing things just like you describe. I can sit there and go, yep, that's this, that, decolonize, deconstruct,
Right. Right. Right.
but they're using very nice words to make it
Yeah.
sound like parents are going, well, yeah, what's wrong with that?
Right. Yeah. Like they use words like diversity, right, and inclusion and the social emotional learning, things like that. Is sounds good, but they definitely came from the same what they call that, the same blueprint. Or and actually, I spent a couple months last summer to figure out what is the root of critical race theory.
Mhm.
So I kind of traced back to uh, uh, Antonio Gramsci,
Gramsci, yeah.
yeah, who was called the father of cultural Marxism. So basically, he was saying like um, he actually did some soul searching because um, Marxism same the theory didn't really work with a reality, because according to Marx, communism uh, uh, should take power in highly industrialized countries like Germany, like United Kingdom, but it didn't happen. It happened in Russia, which is really backward country, and of course later on happened in China, which is even more backward. So that's kind of against the Marxist theory. So Gramsci basically said the reason it didn't happen in the West because in the West it's not like Russia and China are highly centralized. In the West, you have the cultural institutions that will stop communism. So he actually identified five cultural institutions, which are family, religion, education, media, and the law. And he says that in order um, uh, to succeed in the West, communists have to infiltrate, have to take over those constitutions. And if you look at what's happening now, I think they are there. They pretty much, the marriage get destroyed in the West, and also there are so many Marxists in the higher education, um,
Mhm.
and of course, even you look at entertainment, the Hollywood, all those things are very woke. So they pretty much took over all those institutions. So, like you said, uh, it it, uh, it looks like they are using mouse tactics, but the mouse tactics are not invented by him. It's actually way earlier in the 20s and 30s of those so-called cultural Marxism, and that's why Mao started Cultural Revolution, and it's come from the same, the same blueprint, so to speak.
Right. Do you think it feeds on itself? In other words, that it could have gotten this far in the United States if they hadn't been so successful already in education. And the reason I'm asking is that I've met so many people, younger teachers, young adults, even members of the so-called millennial generation,
Mm,
who seem to be completely ignorant of the Cultural Revolution and Chinese history. They don't know anything about world history. They don't
right,
even know about Western European history to really fully understand the slave trade. So their knowledge of history is so limited, so that if you bring to them these ideas of we're going to change the world and make it better and it's going to be communist and communism's great, they have literally not learned about the horrors. It's
right,
not that it's people always joke around and say, well, has Urban really tried? That's sort of the older hippie kind of communists who say that. But younger people, I think, believe it literally never has been tried. Like they don't even know. You say, what about Mao? And they're like, who?
you're
What
right,
about Pol Pot? Who's that?
right,
Where's Cambodia on a map?
right,
So in other words, they had a certain measure of success in education and they started dumbing us down for 30, 40 years. And then it was just lickety split, not hard at all. You've now got a whole generation of people who've not been taught anything about it.
right.
And all you do is feed them the new food, and they think the new food is the only food.
Yeah. Well, it's in a way it's kind of like fashions, right? Every 40 years, something will come back because the
Yeah.
young
You
people,
fail to teach the history.
right? The young people just never experienced that. And also, you talk about the 60s hippies. The problem with well, the problem with those people who tried, who later on became professors and who are teaching, those teachers and fit into those kind of ideology to them.
Yeah.
So somehow they never give up on that, even though they tried and failed. I mean, it just
I have a theory about that. I mean, it's a
okay.
combination theory. One part is personality. In other words, there are some people who just absolutely can never admit they're wrong. And I think a
Mhm.
fair number of them make it into positions like professors and, these kinds of positions where they have authority over other people by default, but they don't have to actually produce anything.
Right,
And the other thing is that because they haven't actually produced anything, most of them haven't worked in the real world.
right,
They've never met a payroll, they've never done those things. They have a lot of wrong, like incorrect notions about how the real world functions, like how
mhm,
things get from A to Z. And
right,
so everything is theoretical. It's easy to get lost in a theoretical world or to come up with scapegoats like it's capitalism's
right,
fault. It's
yeah,
the fault of the industrialists, whatever. Because if they were ever really on the ground in those places and saw all the incentives and all the how the sausage is made,
right,
then they might actually say, oh, it's not really that easy is one thing, but they don't. So they can live in their little fantasy world where they're the only thing preventing their toddler-esque fantasy from coming true is those guys I don't understand. It's a kind of
right,
otherism.
yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of those professors, just like you said, they never lived in the real world. They live in their own, bubbles, and also especially when you're talking about education, talking about philosophy and sociology and all that, your theory can never be tried, right? You never actually go there to say, okay, this is wrong. It's very hard to not like a natural science, like math and physics, you can try it out pretty quickly to figure out, oh,
Yeah.
that didn't work, or that doesn't work. But in those kind of things, I mean, it's very hard to say, okay, that is wrong, or
Well,
that
we
is
know
right.
because we know that it's unethical to experiment on large numbers of people to test out your social science theory and then come back because if it doesn't work, you've just ruined the lives of other people. So you can't test it out. But here's what if you keep teaching your theory and you keep teaching your theory and you keep acting like it's great and everything will be great if only my theory were put in place,
Right,
but I can't experiment and give you data because that would be unethical. So what happens is all the people you've taught, so they get filled with the the image of if only this could be true. They test in real time. They go out and they implement it, or they go out and they demand it. And that's another place where our freedoms and our ability to vote and things like that. So you have people who've had their heads filled with largely theoretical concepts
yeah,
and fantasies of how things can be so perfect, and also a hatred for the people alleged to have made it not that way. Now they go out and vote,
yeah, yeah,
and thus begins the long range test
Right.
scientific test. And even the very best social scientists, I mean, Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein were talking about this on a podcast I listened to. If they're responsible, they're really on the scientist side of it, they understand that their theories, as they can think of all the different potential unintended negative consequences, and they still won't get them all,
Right.
because human beings are human beings, and
Right.
there are so many motivators for why people make decisions, not just independently, but once they start interacting with each other, that once your theory or your plan hits the ground, it's kind of like war plans, like
Right.
now we got to see what actually happens, or over time it morphs.
Right.
And then when you add government, you add the potential for corruption and all that too. So it's social science. I think they're teaching it, and then the test is real. People
Right.
latch onto it.
Yeah. I think the things about people who's pushing for those Marxist ideologies is that they are not real scientists.
No.
It's kind of like religion. It's really come down to Marxism is a religion, is a secular religion, and I mean, in many ways they behave like religious fanatics. I mean, they are the reality. Just uh, they 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 don't really care about reality. So, like Marxism, I mean, talking about communism, those have been tried in the past many times, right? They don't look at the facts. They still say, "Oh, they didn't get it right. This time we'll get it right." Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right.
And the
Well,
thing is, they don't even, like in America, they don't even um, I mean, experiment in a small scale before they just go for the whole country, right?
mhm.
And in a way, there's similar things happening at education. There's many new, like so-called innovative education ideologies and methodologies. They never really get tested well. They just kind of implement the whole, at the national level, right? The Common Core and everything is, we watch, we're going to just like do it. Not really kind of testing well and see what happens, because they have something, they have ideology behind it, and that's the thing. They are not really guided by science or things like that.
Well, now that you mentioned that, and you have a background in math, teaching
Mhm.
of math,
You're right.
one of the areas I've been concerned with lately, and I'm not, full disclosure, I'm not very good at math, and I wasn't a math teacher, but all the more reason I'm very concerned about how
Right.
it's being taught, because I think my kind of student, or the reason I wasn't good at math is probably attributable to some of these goofy methods, even though I was in school in the 70s, because the new math and things had already sort of started then.
Mhm.
So my question for you is, are you seeing some of these things in math education? I'm seeing it, for example, in California's new math framework they want to implement. I'm seeing it in the use of things like Eureka Math, and in like New Jersey is using it. All over the country, they're using Eureka Math, which they actually say right up front is about putting equity into math and social justice into math. And I find it to be very language intensive with kids who haven't learned to read properly,
Yeah.
and they're pushing that concept envelope where they keep saying, but we're going to have the kids understand things conceptually, and they'll develop a wonder and a joy of learning math, and they don't need to learn procedural math. And I'm thinking, like, where's the data that this works? Like,
Right.
I'm seeing kids math scores go down, down, down.
Right.
What are you seeing? Again, I'm not a math expert. What do you see?
Well, when I started teaching, I taught at a private college private school. So my my main responsibility is to teach calculus, which is a AP calculus with the elective. So the kids come to my class. They are,
The
the
top students in the
top
first place.
students,
Yeah.
but they have a hard time understand the concept of the calculus. And I after I look into it, so the reason I found that is not because they don't understand calculus. It is because they don't understand algebra. So they don't have that fundamental understanding. So from that moment, once I found it, I always spend the first 2 months to go over the concept, the uh, uh, about algebra, and after that they can learn calculus. But the thing is, they all have uh, A's in their grade, and so then I started to notice that the reason they got A's and B's is because the grades has been inflated
Yeah.
so much, and I think people inside the system probably didn't notice because it's gradual. I came in right as a outsider. I was engineer and I got to teach, and that's first thing I noticed. It just doesn't make sense because the grades does not reflect um, how well the student understand the subject. You could like really don't understand anything, still get A, I mean, and B and A. For example, they get full mark on their homework, and then when they take test, even though they got everything wrong, they still get half the score. And so if you consider how the things put together, then they can easily get B without understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And then we keep kind of push them, uh, you know, to the next grade, to the next grade. So when they actually reach the senior years, they are so behind. But they still can graduate with like very high GPA, and then when they go to college, they cannot take college level classes, so they have to take remedial classes. So that's the first thing I found. I say this is not right because like really we are lying to the parents, right? The parents look at school, the grades, look at, oh, that's nice, get B's and A's, but they did
Mhm.
not understand that um, the grades has been inflated. So that's the first thing I noticed. And second thing I noticed is how the math was taught, and it's everything is focused on how to solve a problem instead of why. Why you solve the problem in that way.
Like,
Um,
why do you need the right answer? They seem very unconcerned with the correct answer also, I'm noticing. Like, they'll teach 4 or 5 different strategies for doing the problem, but then even if the child gets the problem wrong, as long as they can sort of show that they understand the strategies, that they will get an A. And I always thought in math it is, especially you're an engineer, like, you need the right answer.
right.
It
Yeah.
kinda matters.
Yeah.
Bridges are gonna start falling down.
Right. Definitely. I mean, that's the hard fact, right? You have to get it right. But the thing is, like, uh, uh, I think the way we teach math is not really shouldn't mean we definitely teach them like the the process, how to get there, right? But we also need to teach them like the whys behind it, right? Why we do it this way, why we do it not the other way. Or maybe there are different ways of solving a problem, but we don't teach the why anymore. Everything is just like, uh, well, that was back. It's about 10 years ago now. Is everything focused on how to do it? So students, they memorize how to do it just for passing a test, and then after that they just forgot it because they never really understand it. But now even worse, like you mentioned, they don't even care about to get the right answer. They don't. Yeah, it definitely once the CRT and things get into the school, everything just take you know a nosedive, and that's why we see the test scores have become so bad now.
Right. And I feel like, especially having read some of the people you're talking about as far as their ideas, postmodernists, and the people, even just thinking about things like gender, where they talk about all of reality as a construct. I mean,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
actually put that into words. Well, it seems to me, if you really want that philosophy to take hold, you have to attack math and science, because those are the 2 areas that are the most focused on objective reality.
right, yeah,
There is a right answer, and there is a process of scientific inquiry that is supposed to be devoted to objective reality
right,
and results and so forth, and not just the process. Well, I found the process. I'm not a process. Just however I made it up, never mind the inputs being correct or anything. So I think it's a direct assault on reality.
It is, and also that's part of the plan. I mean, at the first, I don't quite understand why we purposely dumbing down the students, and that's not new, right? That's
Yeah.
has been there for several decades. Um, uh, I think I was really uh, enlightened by John Gatto's book,
Mm,
talking about dumbing down and all that. He has seen that for a long time.
mhm.
At the first, I thought, okay, maybe something's wrong. Something's wrong. I mean, definitely we have something wrong with our system, but I thought that's something, uh, you know, that's something is broken, right?
Right.
And you have this, but it turns out that I think I come to realization that it was done on purpose, the
Mm,
whole dumbing down process, because that would just prepare them now to uh, push down this woke ideology and say, okay, everything this society for, because now you don't have any skill. So you go to the real world without any skill. What are you going to do? You're going to blame on the society, right? And it can easily turn you into they called um, social justice, activist or social justice warriors. Yeah, during the Cultural Revolution, those are the red guards. Really, it means something. Everything is wrong. The society needs to be, turned upside down.
right.
But by dumbing down the students, then they don't have a good skill. They couldn't survive in the real world, and that's easily can turn them into, uh, you know, communists.
Now, in Mao's China, though, I mean, you had the first 2 years with no school, and then the schools came back and they were teaching all of the, Chairman Mao's preferred things. Were they waging a war on knowledge too? I mean, not just the four olds, but like, did they teach math and science? I mean, did they, or no?
No,
Did they
no.
also want an ignorant population?
Yeah, I mean, everything is about political. I mean,
Okay.
everything is to, uh, in China, it's called the red. So it has to be red, which means that you have this class consciousness, right? I mean, and you are trying to change the world. It's always like change the world for the better, and for the communist utopia, right? Everybody is equal, and that's what the equity is, the equal outcome. So
Mm,
when I heard about equity, that's like that is communism, and I was surprised that a lot of um, politicians and a lot of school administrations just take it without even questioning what it is. I mean, to me, just so obvious. Since
exactly.
when do we want to have equal outcome as a
Exactly.
country, right?
Exactly. And they
Uh,
play with the words. They'll say, "Oh, that's not what we're saying. We're saying it's equality plus fairness." And then when you ask them, "Well, who gets to define what fairness is? And what do you mean by fairness?"
right.
And then it comes out. It comes out with, well, that people have students are given the supports they need to come out in the same place, as if that's possible, as if all
Right.
that's missing are the right supports. And it's like, or maybe people are different, like
Yeah.
they don't seem to entertain the notion or accept it at all. In fact, they will tell you straight up that you're a bigot if you even suggest that human beings are born different, that we're not meant to have the same outcomes in any respect, nor do we really even want to. Right? I don't necessarily want to be an expert at calculus. I'm okay with that. I'm good at other things. And that's what makes the world possible. We have to be good at different things. Otherwise, just like there are different kinds of plants and animals and
Right.
things. I mean, things. I don't know any place in nature where sameness exists or works.
Well, that's the kind of thing. Like there is a contradiction, right? I mean, even in the three words, diversity,
Yes, they cancel
equity,
each
and
other.
inclusion, they just yeah, they are not going together.
No.
And like you said, yeah, we actually don't even want to have the same, right? I have two children. They're all grown up. One is engineer. One wants to be a voice actor. they don't want to be the same.
No, no, and it's I mean, I was saying I have 3 children, and they're very different, and I mean, it's, I think what we're the message we're almost sending to children when we focus on equity is that if you don't end up in the same place, that's bad. So that's thing for the first one, and as your peers. Secondly, look around for find someone to blame for that
Right.
instead of realizing that we're um you know it's Robert Podisky was on here the other day, and he had a great quote. He said, "Are we trying to use our children, or something like, are we trying to use our children to change the world, or teach our children, change the world for them? Or are we trying to help them live in the world that is?" And it
Right.
feels like we're not only trying to change the world for it, we're trying to use them to change the world.
Yeah. Well, they actually didn't hide for that. Like
Yeah.
when my wife went to IU Bloomington school education for her graduate study, and her professors just told them that their job is to make social activists as teachers. So, I mean, it's there. I mean,
Wow. They
yeah, I
just
know.
said it straight out. Like, your job is to turn the students into social justice
Right.
activists.
Yeah, because they do want to, they wanted the students to. I mean, if you look at what even what's saying now to the students, basically they want to build a better world, right? More equitable and sustainable and whatever, a nice world, and they want the students to be the activists, the student be the changing agents. So they didn't even hide it. I mean, they never did. It's just something like, I think as parents and also as teachers, we just didn't take that as serious.
Right. And they're taking advantage of a student being, young and ignorant. They haven't learned things
Right.
yet, as just a matter of fact, being more given to emotion. Their rational brain is not fully developed. The natural desire to please the adults that are around them. Possibly their parents have even told them explicitly, listen to the teacher. So I think the whole thing to me feels exploitative. And the methodology they're using is very cult like.
Oh yeah,
So,
definitely. Yeah,
yeah.
in a way that uh, I like to say that Marxism is a Christian cult because it does based on the Christian ethics, right? Uh,
Altruism.
yeah, and also uh, our goal is the next life. We have this new world, right? New heaven, new earth, and everybody is there. I mean, we all, brothers and sisters. Uh, but the communist wants to build a heaven on earth without God. But that we know it turns into hell on earth. But a
Right.
lot of things they use is really uh, based on like, I mean, when we teach our kids, our kids grew up in church, right? You teach them to be fair. You teach them to take care about the poor and care about uh, you know, um, that's something we definitely need to do as Christians. But the Marxism kind of twisted that
Mhm.
into that it's no longer is done voluntarily by individuals. It was
Mhm.
done by the government by to force something into this so-called fairness, right?
Right.
I mean, and that's why kind of our the young kids kind of uh, it's easy for them fall into it because they are in a way they are um, hijacking the terms that we teach them early on, right? To be fair, to be considerate, yeah, to be to have the empathy and all that. But they use those words, but twisted the meaning of that. So
Right.
to them, the fairness is different from what we are teaching our kids, right? And
Right.
even the word justice, their justice is different from what uh, our understanding of justice is.
Right.
So
Right.
their justice is the same thing. It's like everybody should be the equal. So
Well, it
If
would be like saying everything is unjust unless it's the way I want it. It's a
right,
toddler's point of view.
right, not fair,
This
right?
isn't fair.
It's
It's
not fair.
not, because it's not
Yeah,
what I want. I mean, well,
right.
that's not the definition of fairness at all.
No, no, it's not. And also we have to realize, I think there's something now we have to teach our children that about the personal, uh, uh, the individual rights, the personal
Mm,
properties and personal sovereignty. I mean, it's nice to help someone, but if someone force you to help someone, then that is evil, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's
Yeah, it literally is, and that's why I think you're right that they've done is sort of co-opted the, um, the sort of cultural ethic
right,
that we have as people who come from a Judeo-Christian, background, which
right,
is, I mean, even if you aren't Jewish or aren't Christian, whatever, the country was sort of the Declaration, all these things are sort of have that ethic kind of worked
right,
in there.
yeah,
At the same time, though, um, there there's no grace, there's no redemption, there's no potential for, just going your own way. Like even in Christianity, it's, love the sinner, hate the sin, so
right,
you don't, if somebody's different from you or somebody disagrees with you or somebody doesn't believe, you don't hate them or force them. And that's not to say that we haven't had inquisitions in the past, right? The
right,
Spanish Inquisition, so forth. So throughout history, there have been even Christian cults. Like there have
right.
been, cults that have taken those same ideals, even with keeping the God concept,
Hmm.
and made it absolute and tyrannical. What
Right,
they've just done is, I think they've capitalized on a gap because we've become very secular as a nation. And so, especially our young people are missing some kind of something to believe in, something to feel
right,
like they belong. What's the point of all this? So I think they've captured that whole and then blended it with the ethic that we all, even secularists, like raise our kids to be, like you said, fair and all that. And they
yeah,
kind of mushed it together, but using that cult like idea where we're
yeah,
going to take away all potential for being a good person without these ideas. Like if you don't subscribe to these ideas, you are bad.
right,
You're
yeah,
racist, you're homophobic,
yeah,
you're trans, you're all the obics and the ists.
yeah.
That's what you
Exactly. So yeah, they're not definitely not trying to reason with you. They are
yeah.
trying to, you know, if you are
Mhm.
not with us, then you are against us. So you must be
Right,
bad
right.
people. And
Didn't help that we had some leaders who had said words exactly like that, that injected that into the culture. In other words,
right.
along the way, I think they got lucky in many respects, in the sense that even people who, if you sat down with them and talked to them about these ideas, would say that I reject that out of hand. I think that's terrible, et cetera. And yet they don't realize they were still using in political spheres and even in educational spheres, they were still using the language of this kind of totalitarianism. When
Hmm.
you use terms like words are violence, when you use terms like you're either with us or against us, that kind of works its way into the culture, and you end up with this kind of tribalism, and you end up with Will Smith hitting someone at the Oscars
Hmm.
because they told a joke, and
Hmm.
everyone accepting it and him going back to his seat because it's just been a slow drip
Right.
of, these concepts even coming out of the mouths of people who aren't specifically woke.
Hmm. Right. I mean, definitely there is a culture, right? Especially in the entertainment. A lot of times those ideologies would come to us through entertainment without we knowing it.
Mhm.
And somehow we're just accepting it and
Yeah.
without questioning it. So I think I really like what on your website you talk about the purpose of education is to develop the capacity for reason. I
Mhm.
mean, definitely that is help people how to reason. Especially student to learn how to reason, right? To figure out if this is right or wrong. I mean, why is that right or wrong? And now most uh, Americans, especially the young people, they are based on their feelings
Mhm.
instead of, you know, based on some kind certain principles. They don't even know what that those principles are anymore because we don't teach them, right? That's uh, one of the problems with our education system. We really don't teach them how to reason. It's always like you memorize this, then you you pass a test. You memorize this, you
Mhm.
pass a test. And it doesn't matter if you forgot everything the next year. And
Exactly.
we keep saying this. Like, I mean, I remember like when I started teaching, everybody's talking about this. After the summer, people will forget about things. I mean, why is that, right? If they forgot about anything, that's because they didn't really understand it.
Mhm.
But we just don't really we're still doing the same thing without actually trying to make any change. But
Right.
of course, later on, realize that uh, the system is, in a way, the system we have now is beyond fixing. Um, as parents, we have to do something different, like what you did. Homeschooling is definitely people have that. Um, uh, are able to do that, definitely homeschool or home educate their kids. And or you can look into like some small schools and all that. Unfortunately, nowadays, many private schools suffer the same thing from the public
Mhm.
schools because the same structure, right? The same hierarchy. One of
It can be worse
yeah,
as we've seen.
right. And I think the fundamental flaw of both public and private education is because nobody in the system has any stake on the future success of the students.
Right.
So, right, they just once they graduate, that's gone. Whether or not they make it, it
So I
doesn't.
keep telling parents, what kind of person do you want coming home to Thanksgiving dinner? Like, you have a vested interest in what this person is gonna be. That education is it's an intangible, it's up here for the
Right,
rest of their lives, and you obviously wanna have a relationship with your children well into, your advanced years and until you die.
right,
So, be
and
sure you
it's
like them.
right, and it's hard to have a relationship when you let someone else, especially in a school setting, right? You don't really
Mhm.
spend time with them. Like as homeschool mom, you understand that's how you build up the connection, right?
Mhm.
That's how you build up uh, the the how to say uh, the tie, right? The family
And
ties
trust
and the
too.
trust, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things when I was teaching uh, at the private school, actually did a survey. This is actually a Christian private college prep school. On my senior class, I took a kind of informal survey. I said, okay, if you had to make a decision, like life changing decision, who'd you talk to? And out of the whole class, only one person said she's going to talk to her mom, and the rest said, I'm talking to my best friend. Okay, now your best friend probably don't even know much about those kind of
Wow.
things. You shouldn't, right? But that's the thing. It has been in the school environment since you know pre-K, so they never actually got time really to develop that kind of trust and
Yeah,
that kind of relationship with their parents, and then yeah,
that's hard, and it does happen. I mean, even with parents who work hard at trying to keep in contact with their kids, whatever, like as you said, it's hard to make up for 8 hours a day when another adult is or other adults are primary, and especially when those other adults are violating the boundary in the first place, because what we're
right,
seeing now is they're not just spending time with them and teaching them academic subjects, they are violating their personal boundaries, they're attempting to separate the children from the parents. They are telling the children that if their parents don't agree with them, that the parents are oppressive. So it's
right,
very similar to Mao, where it's like mistrust your parents, report on your parents. Your parents don't have your best interest at heart, but we do, and we'll keep your secrets. It's not only the behavior of groomers, but it's the behavior. It's behavior of cults, and it's the behavior of what they did. It seems to me in when you were a kid in Mao's China, because how else would children be persuaded to rat out their parents, or they could possibly be killed or go to jail? You have to somehow tell the children that the parents are dangerous for them.
right.
So
Uh,
it's
and yeah, and also because Mao want us to build a new China, right? So anything in a way has to be pushed aside. and that's kind of communist ideology, or maybe the psychology is that uh, you have to destroy things to build a new thing,
Right.
right? You have to. They said in order to make omelet, you have to break some eggs. So in order to build something good, you have to, destroy something.
Except
Uh,
except the analogy doesn't work that great because what they're taking is they're taking a perfectly edible omelet, okay? And
yeah,
they're saying, "I'm really, really hungry. In fact, I'm starving, and I have an omelet in front of me, but I don't really like this particular kind of omelet. It's like got herbs and I don't really like that. So I want a different omelet. So even though I'm starving, I'm going to throw this omelet in the trash, and then I'm going to go have to figure out how to make eggs because I don't know where they come from exactly. Do you guys know where eggs come from? I'm not really sure. Maybe we'll have to figure that out. We got to make the ingredients for the omelet to then make a brand new, perfect, wonderful, oozing with cheese, delicious omelet that we really, really want to eat. But first, we got to destroy the omelet that's perfectly edible. Yeah, that makes total sense.
yeah. Well,
Now what?
yeah,
That's
that's
what they're doing.
basically right. That's basically Marxist ideology. That's how they look at things. Is
Yeah.
that uh, they believe that the new society has to come from the ruins of the current society. I mean, that's basically is what, in a way, that's what Revelation, right? Talking about the new heaven and earth, and what we know today, they will be destroyed, right?
Do you
And
think most
good
of the
news,
people doing this believe this like the way people believe in a religion? Or do you think there is a hefty number of cynics who are using it and using weak people, weak-minded people, mentally ill people, depressed, whatever, who might latch onto these ideas because they just want to take advantage of them after they get all the power?
right? Well, I think both. You mean you do have some people who sincerely believe in that. Like we talk about the Gramsci, right? He was put in prison for many years, and he died basically in prison. So I truly believe that he really, really believed in that ideology. He truly believed that he wants to build a new world, and also like both my parents were communists, and they were willing to die for their belief. So you have that, and also you have people uh, like Stalin. I mean, even Mao, who's just using that for their, personal gain. They just want to have a power, so they can. They always in totalitarian kind of this kind of system. It always the bad people, come to the top. In a lot of ways, if you look at the many organizations, I mean, it is common for people who are power hungry, right, to attain that kind of leadership position. I mean, good people normally don't want to have that kind of power,
Right.
but there you have people who wants that kind of power, and normally, I mean, if it is a kind of uh, totalitarianism kind of system or dictator kind of system, always bad people come to the top.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, and people definitely will use that. I mean, if you look at the uh, right now, the whole diversity, equity things. I mean, there are many we call that race hustlers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are actually making big bucks out of
Yeah, they are. DEI
listening.
is a huge business. They make a fortune, and I feel like they're having a laugh at us. In other words, they're making a ton of money, and meanwhile, many of them, as you pointed out, are secretly going, "Isn't this great? I'm making bank while I'm tearing their entire society apart." Like,
Right.
there's almost like a revenge component too.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like Ibram Kendi, right? He wrote a book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, right? He's basically saying like so capitalism is bad. So he said that racism is capitalist, capitalism is racist. So they were born together and they will die together. So basically, he wanted to destroy capitalism,
Mhm.
but
Says the man who charges $20,000 for 20 minutes of speaking.
yeah, he definitely
Yeah,
he
he
made a
definitely
lot of
wants to
money.
destroy capital or yeah, and it's working. I mean, he wanted a federal Department of, Equity or whatever it was he wanted, a cabinet level position.
Anti-racism. Yeah.
Anti-racism, that's it. And
Mhm.
Washington State just announced that at least one school district there, they've openly admitted that they're going to discipline the students based on their race.
Oh,
They're going to discipline them differently based on race, which is obviously a violation of, the Civil Rights Act and violation of the Constitution.
right.
But they don't seem to have any shame about it. It's like the Constitution doesn't matter anymore at all, which we probably know already. But that's already happening. That's Kendiism in practice.
Exactly. Definitely.
So,
And this had been happened in the past, probably a decade at least, but in more subtle way. Is because a lot of public schools, they have the quota
Yep.
based on the race.
Mhm.
So therefore, when you get to your quota, then you are not going to discipline
That's right.
a student which have that in that race, right?
Right.
So in a way, they already
And the
using-
students know it. The
right.
students know it and
Yeah.
exploit it. So, because it's what people do. People are given to violence. People are given to crime. People are given to behaving badly, as you point out. They look for ways to exploit that to do it more. It's not like they're suddenly say, "Oh, I won't get a harsh punishment. I think I won't be bad." It doesn't work like that. That's not human nature. That's the other thing that these people who support these ideologies completely dismiss is a concept of human nature. They absolutely write it off. It doesn't exist. You have the scientist, was it Wilson, who recently died, who wrote the definitive work, I guess, on human nature, and it was then recently branded a racist, or maybe he was at the time too, but now it's just like,
Okay.
we can't even talk about him because there's no such thing. You're like a blank slate. This is all communism. I mean, this is all the same idea.
Yeah. Well, that's actually is definitely it is not invented by communism, but before that, but it's those for like in the past we call the social reformers and all that, right? And they do believe that they can change human nature through education.
Right.
That's the whole thing about the communism is socialism is that, well, right now people are kind of selfish, but we can educate them. We can make them to be unselfish. And that's what
we can kill 100 million of them, and, who have a selfish impulse, like, I'd like to eat and not die, so I'm going to eat
right.
this food.
Yeah. When I was in school, when I was in school, that's what we've been taught, right? You have to be unselfish. You have to contribute to the society. You mean all that, but we are still selfish. The human nature.
We're here to survive and thrive and all that, and it just would be, there's rational selfishness and then there's
Right.
selfishness, but if you don't allow rational selfishness, you get a whole lot of irrational selfishness. That's why there's more corruption in communist societies, more, like the kind of oligarchs and, organized crime,
Right.
things like that is really ugly and pervasive because you're not facilitating the ability to be good.
Right.
In fact, some of our founders commented that in some of their writings, how they wanted people to be free enough to be able to be virtuous.
Right.
So you
otherwise,
can't be virtuous in a totalitarian system.
right. I mean, if you are being forced to do something good, then that's not good anymore, right? That becomes
Right.
evil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I do have a question. How did you, despite that kind of a school education in the beginning, you obviously got a wonderful education at some point. How did that occur?
Well, I think first of all, I was good in math in a way. So, and the math actually helped me to think rationally. I mean, that's what math is. You learn math, right? To think. I mean, like we call about reason, right? Math
Right.
is about reasoning, right? Inductive reasoning and mostly is deductive reasoning. Is to think, okay, why we say this is right? Why we say something's wrong? What is what's the foundation? What's behind it? And so I definitely had a good, in a way, kind of self-learned how to think as a scientist, which is based on facts, right? And based on your reasoning, based on your logic. And then in the 80s, the country opened up. So so we know what happened during the Cultural Revolution. So when I was during the Cultural Revolution, I just didn't know what's going on. I just follow whatever they told me what to do in school and all that. But once in the 80s, I was in college, I have access to those informations. I started to say, okay, why was kind of considering, communism looks good, but why it ends up bad? So I was thinking about that. I was interested in philosophy and all that. And then I went to Canada for my graduate study, and that's also allowed me to see something I could not get in China. There is more, informations from different sources. So I kind of I think it was really because my training in science, which helped me to eventually figure out what is right, what is wrong.
Right. So
Yeah,
like I said, that's why they're assaulting science and math. They
yeah,
don't want that to continue. They've got to close that loophole.
right.
And you had the good fortune to be in a university in Canada before the woke took over there.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
And
I have a friend or a locals member who is a physics professor
uh-huh,
in Quebec, I believe, or Montreal, maybe. And
right.
he is, he tells us that this stuff is all over in his university. It is like
Yes.
not even free speech for what he can teach. So,
No, no. Fortunately, that was the 80s. So uh,
mm,
the Canadian, at least the university I went to is University of British Columbia, and is on the west coast, and
mhm,
they still have a lot of British kind of uh, style kind of education, which is different from Americans.
mhm,
Americans' education are more utilitarian. It's more, okay, can you make money out of it?
mhm,
While back there, we still more focused on the academic kind of curiosity. So I actually had a good training there. And then because I see what's different now, and I also went to Bible study, and I it took my wife and I 5 years in Bible study on campus Bible study group, and talking with uh, people had like PhDs in physics and chemistry and all that. Um, really talking about through you know really trying to make sense out of it, like atheism versus theism and Christianity and all that. Um, so, and that actually helped me a lot after becoming a Christian, and also from that point on, it really helped me to uh, understand our heritage of the Western culture. They are good and bad, right? But still, Western culture in terms civilization still the most advanced, and that was influenced basically mostly by Christianity, and so it kind of helped me in that way,
mhm,
in that kind of process to eventually come to what I have today.
mhm,
So, when I was actually in Canada, I was a liberal. Uh, and just because medias and all that, I did not realize that time the medias actually are so not only biased, they are really, in a way, uh, they what do you call that? There is a dishonesty there.
mhm. Like
Uh,
propaganda.
yeah, bias we understand, right? Everybody has a bias. We each one have bias, but purposely not to report on something because that against your narrative, then that is dishonesty.
Yeah, they have
Uh,
an agenda.
yes. So when I came to America, the first culture shock is um, uh, that people in Indiana actually love Ronald Reagan. Because when I was in Canada, you all hear bad things about Ronald Reagan, right? I thought that nobody likes Ronald Reagan in America, and then I came to Indiana and saw a street. A, a highway named after him. So that also kind of helped me to think, oh, the
Mhm,
Western media actually is also bad in a way. I mean, not as bad as Chinese media,
Yeah.
but it's still right. I mean, definitely they have the bias, but also they have that uh, um, agendas behind what they are trying to push, their narratives. So it's kind of the process helped me to be able to discern like what is going on here, and also where they come from.
Right.
And
And
unfortunately, we don't teach our we don't have that in our education um,
right.
anymore. I mean, the
Right.
whole like right now CRT and all that, they are really kind of uh, trying to cancel the Western
Yeah.
culture.
Well, that's something I noticed that you just sat and spoke to us for 2 or 3 minutes extolling, the virtues of Western culture and how it's, more advanced or it's superior or whatever. I can't remember exact word that you said, but it was something that was good.
Yeah,
And yet I think there might be people who would say, But but you're not of that, because the woke people want you to stay in your little box of
yeah,
being Chinese. They don't want you to see yourself as American or
right,
Canadian or anything
right,
or Western, for
right.
certainly not as Western. In fact,
Not us.
they will tell children born to American born parents if they can go back, 4 or 5 generations and find somebody who came from a supposedly marginalized,
Mm,
culture or something, they'll tell them they're that
right,
and not American, even though they're as steeped in Western culture as anybody else. And I've seen that so much, and it's very obvious they're trying with the Howard Zinn's education project, and of course his textbook being used all over the place to this day. They're trying desperately to smear libel. I mean, it's
right,
it's not just like reframe Western culture or add some negative things about it. They're literally engaging in an organized smear campaign to destroy it and marginalize it. And I just find it so interesting, when you obviously want to go the other direction. And so what I would love for you to do for the audience is explain a little bit more in, a few more details why you want to do that. You said because of reason in this, but give us a little bit more about why you think West is worth saving and we shouldn't apologize for that, or we should push back hard on
right.
those who say it's bad.
Yeah, and also I think it really come down to uh, human nature, right? We definitely are sinners, but also we want to have a better world, right? Something we can live in, and definitely we do have the a vacuum in our heart, which is God shaped. We're looking for that, right? Something better, um, and when I was growing up in China, that was it's really dictatorship during the Cultural Revolution. Then the China opened up, and that kind of gave me the window to do some comparison. I mean, comparison with the Chinese culture and the Western culture. And there is even uh, I think it's still now that there is one school of thought that is just because you are born Chinese, then you shouldn't uh, adapt Western culture
Mhm.
because we want to be like our Chinese, right? We have Chinese characteristics and all that.
Sure. Right.
Uh, it's more kind of like, in a way, kind of like like you said, Kindeism. You say, just because we are black, so therefore we are not going to adopt the Western culture, and that is, I mean, as since I was trained as a scientist, that is against that belief, right? As a scientist, we just take whatever true. It doesn't matter where it come from, and in the past, every culture is trying to learn from each other, right? And I think something uh, like our Chinese do not want to learn from the culture is more recent in the past maybe 100 and 200 years. Is more kind of nationalism. We have the national identity and all that, but before that we don't have that. If you look at Europe, uh, in the medieval, even after that, they don't have that national identity. They don't think them
Mhm.
as a French or English. They learn from each other, right? When you once you have something in one country, then every other countries adapt. Once you have, the printing press, then other countries will take it. It doesn't say, okay, this is not ours. We don't want to use it, right? We don't have that. It is really in a way in recently past 200 years, but uh, we actually need to in a way to see the danger of that kind of thought is
Right.
just because your skin color, then therefore you have to stuck in your own culture
Yeah.
and not really, because that doesn't help, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
compare the Chinese culture at the time and the Western culture. I don't like many things in the Chinese culture. It's so there's no individuality. I mean, the uh, before the communists took over, the family is the unit. Everybody
Yeah.
is a member of family. You have to sacrifice everything for the family. Of course, the communists took over. They break that down. There's no family anymore. So you are part of a
Much bigger family.
much big family, right?
Right.
And you have to sacrifice everything for that, the common good, right? We have now
Right.
saying the common good, the community standard, whatever, or the higher good, and uh, but uh, so but in the West, it's more focused on individualism, freedom, and liberty, and all that. And I mean, when you make the comparison, I definitely like more about the Western culture, and
Mhm.
I had no problem to accept it because I can. First of all, as a training as a scientist, you took ever. I mean, scientist has no boundary, right? Scientist has no nationality. Whatever good, just pick it up. I mean, doesn't matter it's come from India or China or German or
Right, right,
Russia. It doesn't matter. And
right.
uh, I think that's something we need to also teach our children, next generation. Don't look
Yeah.
as don't I mean definitely it's good to have a group, but the most important is individuality, right? The
Yeah.
individual freedom, and then on that, then we have the family identity. Right now, unfortunately, in America, a lot of families don't have that family identity anymore.
Right.
Uh, and because once you send their kids to the government run school, you lost that, right?
Right.
You lost
Right.
that identity, and that's something we need to kind of focus on. And then
Exactly.
on that, then you have the community, right?
Right.
It's I mean
And
that's
now that's social media too.
yeah,
So even if your kids aren't in the schools, I mean, we homeschoolers have to deal with this, and it's one of the reasons I tell people, like, keep your kids off the social media as long as you possibly can, because that becomes the competition for
hmm
your family. There's a weird, even though it's disembodied voices or in text, sometimes kids, and especially when they're going through those difficult times in the middle grade years and so forth, and they want peers and they want that peer interaction, but they can get a false sense of intimacy
yeah,
with people on the internet they wouldn't necessarily get in person, and it pulls them, even though they're still in the bedroom in your house, it pulls them farther away from your values, farther away from your trusting you
right,
as the person to go to.
right, yeah. That's definitely that's a danger there. The social media that you become,
Yeah.
in a way, it become a mob, right?
Mhm.
There's
Exactly.
this kind of mob mentality. Like if
Right.
you have to stay with that, you cannot say something different,
Mhm. Right.
or you try something different. I think that's something we, as Americans, in a way, is very unique. Is that uh, it was founded on a set of principles,
Mhm.
right? It's not just because people got together in the uh, same geographic area. It's our our founding document, the Constitution, uh, which is unique,
Yes.
and also in what is unique is that it affirms uh, the individual freedom, liberty, and individual sovereignty, right?
Right.
And then the government is built to protect that, which is different. Like many other countries is the government is there, You are there to contribute to the government.
Right.
You are there to serve the
And you
government.
just kind of hope they leave you alone and let you do stuff. And of course,
Yeah,
in some countries, they do. I mean, they've decided that they're going to, give you
right,
some rights. And so people say, well, that's a free country. And I'm like, nah, without a constitution that like protects those liberties, not really, no.
right.
So
Like
keep
in
that.
China right now, there's no such thing as, well, you have a private property, but the government can take it away.
Yeah.
You really don't have that. You don't have protection of that. Yeah, and right now in America, we actually, in a way, I mean, the whole like woke, ideology, the whole CRT and all that, it's actually
Yeah.
is moving to that way, right?
Yep.
To move towards a totalitarian
They're begging
government.
for it.
Yeah,
They're like beg I mean, I saw a poster yesterday on Twitter. Somebody had done a graphic with these hands. They were like open hands like this with flowers coming out of the hands. And it says something like we were, it's like the dawn of a new day, a government that cares about us or
yeah,
something like that. And this is the same group of people who published a book about teaching for changing the world for, a book for social justice
all right,
educators, and they're all excited and proud of it. And I'm just thinking, be careful what you wish for. You really don't. Either they do understand what they're asking for, and that's really disturbing, or they don't. I mean, there's both disturbing, but or they don't, and they're just like under a spell. It's like a mass psychosis.
right,
But now we've been, you and I could probably go on like forever and ever and ever on this topic. But I did promise the audience, and you are such a font of knowledge about what we could do about it. So I want to make sure that we go into your work, that what you're doing now,
yeah,
because with this is all everyone listening, this is the background similar. He and I have sort of, I mean, philosophically similar paths in terms of like, wow, what is going on? And then analyzing and figuring it out. But Dr. Ping has some very concrete ideas about what to do. So can you tell us what you're working on and what you think about education and what we should be doing instead?
yeah.
Because you just said it can't be saved. So what do we do?
Well, I think the current public education system that is, I mean, we have been trying to reform that, right? Since, I don't know, 5 decades, at least since the 80s. And we put so much, trillions dollars into it, and it's getting worse. So I think we should
Mhm.
come to a realization that, well, it won't work. It cannot be reformed. And
Mhm.
especially, uh, the government cannot do that job. And now we really become the public education. American public education is actually education industrial complex. There are so many
Mhm.
people there trying to make money out of our children.
Yes.
So that's become almost impossible uh, to to change it. I mean, so many people has the vested interest there. They don't want to change. I mean, teachers, for example, teachers union, right? Once, as long as you have teachers union there, it's very hard to make any
That's
meaningful
right.
change. But of course, there are other people involved. Um, uh, so uh, as a scientist, basically, I can look into, well, what is our history of education, where we come from, right? If we don't know where we come from, we are not quite sure where we're going. We just know that right now it doesn't work. But
Right.
uh, but what is a better way of education? So I look at our human history. If you look at education, we actually went through, in a way, like three different versions. So that's why, like, my name is Education 4.0. It's something new, right? So when you look at the first version is that the education was reserved for the elites, for the not only just elites. It's really for, you know, uh, the children's of the rulers, the ruling class.
Right. They have
And
private tutors and
right,
all that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
So in that version, actually, you got several teachers to serve one student. So, right, you if you think about a prince of a country or princess, then you got different teachers to teach, and each one are their kind of expert. And then we move on. The second version is that the smart kids also get educated so that they can serve
Yep.
the ruling class, right? You have like people are lawyers and accountants, and people have special skills, and
Right.
they are basically servants. That actually came up with the elite class, that they are children of those servants, and that those servants, because their skills, they have a good high um, social status, and during that phase, you can see the private schools like Confucius. He was teaching his students later on became, administrators and
Exactly.
working for for the kings and for the nobles, and then the third is where after the industrialization we need educated mass. So on the version 1 and version 2, and the mass were not educated and for purpose, right? You
Right.
want to keep them ignorant so that you can rule them.
Right.
Yeah, the Jewish is a exception, because Jewish people, they know, they have the Bible, so their kids are always educated.
And
They
you
are
have a literacy test as your rite of passage into adulthood.
right. So
With
they are
the bar mitzvah, right?
right. So they're definitely the exception of the norm. And then uh, after industrialization, we need to educate math, and that's where we have those mass education, right? The government running education. So you are more get into this um, uh, assembly line model. So what we have right now is really assembly line, right? From K to 12, right?
And
You
they
move
keep it
up.
moving.
You keep moving, and
Oh, you can't read. That's fine. Keep going.
and so if it doesn't fit in the system, you are the defect, right? You get pushed out. But of course now they just get everything. You don't even care about defect anymore. Everything get graduate from high school.
Well, they've come up with all kinds of fancy new ways to blame those deficits on
Right,
society, the
right.
parents, you name it.
Yeah, exactly.
Never the teachers, never the school. Very convenient.
So that's what we have. The version 3, right? Is mass production, is based on the assembly line model, and also you can see that um, in the past, the version 1, version 2, the teachers are very important. Our teachers are not replaceable, right? You still don't find the teacher, but once you get to the mass, our current version, the student have no choice. I mean, whoever teacher they got, that's what they got. And also
Yeah.
the teachers are replaceable, right? Because they follow the same standard. They're using the same, pretty much the same textbook,
In
and
theory.
everything. You have the teacher's guide, right? To teach you how to teach. So teacher doesn't
Right.
matter anymore. Teacher become like, if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. They can find
Yeah.
somewhere in. That's kind of the that's
Well, and
basically the
now with the woke
line.
stuff, they've come up with the education maybe like 3.5, where they say, "You know what? Just close the door and do what you want, as long as you're following this ideology." So you can have teachers like they don't know how to teach math, they don't know how to teach science, they don't have any subject matter expertise at all. They're like, "I'll go on the internet and print out some lessons." So
Right.
it's a hodgepodge. Even after Common Core, they standardized the standards, but they didn't tell people, here's how you do it.
Hmm.
Like, this is the lesson plan literally that you will use. And even if they did that, we probably wouldn't like that for different reasons.
Right.
But standardizing standards doesn't tell you how to achieve those standards.
Right. And also, why do we need a standard from the government, right?
Thank you.
In the first place, because
Yes.
education should be
Conflict of interest.
right. And also you can look at the version 3, the purpose of education is different.
Yes.
Yeah. And the the version 3, the purpose of education is to produce people who can work in the industry, can, uh, it it's always in a way it's a servant role.
Mhm.
You've been taught how to serve someone, right? Either working in a factory or working a company. You are being prepared to do that. It's not really prepare you to be your own boss or prepare you for, running your own
Mhm.
business.
Sure.
Our current system, actually, if you have a entrepreneur mindset, you don't fit in that system.
Mhm.
You will be considered a defect, right? Because the whole system teaches you to follow the rule, right? That's that's the whole thing. You've been every day being conditioned. You move from one class to another at a certain, the bell rings, you moved on. And that's the whole thing are not natural in terms of children's mental development, in terms of children's learning, right? We know that when we learn something, it's based on our interest, right? At that time, it's not it's not natural to put the time marker there. Like you do this, then when the bell rings, put down everything, then pick up another subject. The whole thing,
Right.
that's the whole like assembly line, like kind of
Right.
those kind of things. It doesn't even it's really outdated because nowadays company do not work like that anymore, right?
Right.
When you work in the company, you don't clock what you do, but we still have the system. The system is there. It's especially the government has put a lot of money into it, uh, and so I think what the new thing is actually a lot of us already like you, homeschoolings and people start micro schools. That's kind of experimenting that new version. The new version, first of all, the education purpose of education is different now. The purpose of education is to train our children to become independent. Uh, you know, um, how to say that independent,
Entrepreneur, like entrepreneurial and
right? Yeah,
yeah.
to really think themselves as the master
Right.
instead of servant.
Even
Uh,
if they choose to go work for someone else,
right,
you should still have the mindset that you work for yourself ultimately, that if things aren't
exactly,
the way you want them, you are adaptable to move on. That like
exactly.
it's a mutual exchange. It's not if I lose this job, I'm out on the street. Like
Right,
it's
right. Yeah,
yeah.
because if you look at the mindset in the version 3.0, the mindset is that your identity is tied up with your profession, your identity is tied up with the company,
Right.
right? And but we know that's not right.
Mm,
Uh, but in version 4 is more say, okay, you you have the liberty to do whatever you want to do. And even if you work for someone, you're just there to provide a service. It's
mhm.
based on mutual contract, right?
Yeah.
And your identity is not tied up with any particular company. You are not going to, way, I'm going to retire from this profession. I mean,
Yes. Gold
and
watch.
right. And also our identity shouldn't be defined by our profession anyway, right?
Mm,
We're not really defined as like engineers and teachers. I mean, we are more than that, right? I think the in the new model, uh, we really teach our kids. I mean, and like you mentioned, entrepreneur mindset. That's kind of I was thinking to build my own school is really focused on that because entrepreneurship teaches you basically you are your own boss, right?
mhm.
That's what it teaches you, and also teaches you that don't complain. I mean, if something is not working, find a solution, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, if we could just teach our kids that, there's so many things that I remember from being a child, like life isn't fair, not everyone's gonna like you, sticks and stones may break your bones, but names can't hurt you.
Uh,
Um, all of these things, I remember even going to my dad or my grandfather and saying, "Oh, this is we're gonna," and they'd be like, who promised you a rose garden? Like, it's yes, that's life. Life doesn't always work out. My father used to call it the vicissitudes of life. Like all best laid plans and things will happen and you have to adapt. And that was so deeply ingrained in my mind from
Hmm.
such a young age, from just that was the message, that was the
Hmm.
message. And I certainly didn't get a competing message at school. It's not that they were repeating the same things my dad said, it's
Hmm.
they weren't fighting it.
You're
So I
right.
didn't go to school and have a teacher say, "Oh, the world should be more fair to you and you shouldn't be
Right.
traumatized and feel sad." So it was just, here's your work, here's what we're doing, here's the homework, do it, go home. Oh, you didn't do your homework, you get an F. I mean, it was very matter of fact. So they weren't competing with the parental authority
Right. Right.
saying, this is what character looks like,
Hmm.
right? And to be entrepreneurial, as you just mentioned, you do have to focus on certain character traits.
Right. Yeah. And that's something like I think that's something student can learn, right? The
Mhm.
mindset, the attitude, and skills. Those you can learn. But I think importantly is uh, to help them uh, to become a free person,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Something like you don't have to rely on a group. You can live on your own. I mean, it's good to have a group, but it's always based on, you know, that's not really your identity.
Right.
You can, I mean, that's why we have those free association, right? I mean, if you don't like this group, go move to a different group and
Mhm.
get a different group. But still to uh, build that confidence that uh, you are right.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
God gave you the talent, and you can be free. You
They
can
can't even figure out what their God-given talents are in today's schools because they don't have that time
no.
to explore or to do that. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you after reading the article about Education 4.0 was where you stand on a content-based or knowledge-based curriculum. What I mean by that is there's fully student led, like unschooling, where the student decides, even at young ages, like, I'm interested in this, and the adults merely help them pursue whatever they selected. And then there's sort of the knowledge base where the adults, especially in the early childhood, you need to learn to read, you need to learn basic mathematics and arithmetic, and use that spongy brain when you're little to memorize a lot of foundational facts. And then once you have some core knowledge, then it's more, we expand more from there. And like, what do you want to spend more time on? And as you point out, we don't have like a hard time stop on this subject. If you want to dive into Roman history,
Hmm.
because you've now read about that, like, let's go and let's do that.
Yeah.
So like a blend of the content and the self-directed, as opposed to right now in the schools, almost all self-directed, or the teacher led is more like, I assign you things to do. I
Right.
don't instruct you.
Right. Well, I'm actually a big fan of classic education.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, classic education is called trivium. They
Yeah.
put it into three phases in terms of child mental development. So the first phase is called grammar, and that's where the kids love to memorize,
Mm,
and that's where they should memorize the facts, not opinions, right? The facts. You mean
right.
the times table and what happened in this day in history,
They
and
love knowing things, don't they,
right,
little kids? Yeah.
yeah, and so that's where you need to focus on. But right now we don't do that anymore, and a lot of kids are struggling. Even high school, even college kids struggling with basic like timetable. They just never had that, uh, and also language, very important, right? I mean, a lot of classic schools, they focus on. I mean, you teach Latin. I'm not sure if that's uh, necessary, but I understand why people wants to have that. Um, but that's the same based on the same principle that you learn because Latin is well defined and in a way it's that language, so you can learn a lot of things about the grammar side of it. I understand that
Mhm.
part. Um,
And read some of the classics you'll
you're
ultimately
right,
read. If you want to read them in their original, you can do
right,
that too.
right, exactly, and mm, uh, so you have that. Uh, then the second stage is called logic, and that's where you need to teach them the reasoning part of it. right?
Mhm.
How to think critically, how to make the argument. You know, everything is based on reason. The reason why I say it is wrong, it's not by my feelings, because I have a reason behind it,
Right.
uh, and
Like
also,
the channel, the reason we learn.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
why I called it that.
I know, I love it. I love it. Right. It's definitely to teach them how to reason, because that basically give them the tool,
Yeah.
right? And then the third stage is rhetoric, is that's where they can organize their thoughts, they can express their thoughts, they can, they can be able to uh, defend uh, their thoughts, and also persuade, right, people by the reason, all that. I think that's actually the good model, and it does, based on my experience, does fit the kids' developmental stages.
Mm.
So definitely the rote memorization has a place, but you need to do that as young as being do that at the young. But
Right.
once you get to the logic step, that's where you can spend time.
Mhm.
I think the math is the algebra and geometry is actually a very good tool there. I mean,
Mhm.
so the reason we learn math actually is not to learn how to do problem, but is to learn the skills, right? I don't know if you read a Dorothy Sears article, The
I don't.
Lost Tools of Learning.
What's it called?
The Lost Tools of Learning.
I've heard of it. Have not read
Yeah,
it.
it's a
Okay.
really good one. So he basically his main argument is that he talked about trivia, but also I think I learned a very important point from her speech is that uh, he said that the subject itself does not really matter. Uh, how to study a subject, the how, the skill to study a subject, that's what matters.
Right.
So he's kind of uh, using analogy of like a carpenter, right? The carpenter, you can make a stool, you can make a table, um, but when you're doing those, you actually learn how to use your tools. You have the basic set of tools, right? And so
Right.
what you make doesn't matter. Make a table, make uh, a chair.
Right.
What matters is you you develop your skill to make something. I think that's something a lot of times even the uh, classic education uh, schools, I mean, call it
Mhm.
classic education schools, they probably miss on that. Is I mean, they're focused on the subject, like the Latin. Well, Latin is good, but the why we learn Latin, right? That's more
Right.
important.
Right.
Not just memorize the vocabulary. I mean, definitely that's good, but also you
Mhm.
learn how to dissect, right? How to
Right.
analyze the sentence structure,
Right.
and so same thing for the math. The
Right.
same thing. I mean, because we're not going to use it, right?
Right.
Algebra, geometry, we're not going to use it. But why we learn that? Learn that is
Right.
learn how to reason. We have
Well,
something.
I've spoken with a few people involved in classical education. I think you'll be happy to learn that they see their role in the classical schools where they are operating or influencing as to help the kids understand that the purpose of learning or the reason we learn, in addition to the reason component and knowing how to think and all that, is to find truth and beauty.
Hmm.
So the pursuit of truth is a little different than, how do I study a subject? Because you also have a component in there of why.
Hmm.
Not all subjects are equally worthy of our study. Otherwise, we wouldn't have all this postmodernist garbage.
Right.
But we want to pursue and study things because there's a value to them, and they do part of why they read the books they read and why they focus on even writing cursive is
Hmm.
to emphasize that there is something called beauty, there is something called truth with a capital T, and we have to have discernment, and we have to take joy in these things. That gives you your purpose, which a lot of students today I think are missing. So if you go, I tutor, and when I try to explain to my students why I want them to read a wider variety of books and I want them to do better at their writing even if they're getting an A in school, the question I always get is, but why? I'm getting an A. What difference does it make? Somebody missed the boat. And what I would see in your education 4.0, when it's not an assembly line, teachers have the opportunity to romance the student. In other words, like show them why knowledge
Right.
and knowing things deeply and understanding things deeply is, beautiful, fun, helps you pursue something of value called truth that is more valuable than something else. So when they get bitten by that bug, and I think they have to be first, because how to study, we don't want to become another procedure that they learn. We
Right.
want it to be an inclination, a driven by desire to learn. And cultivating that, I think, has to start very, very early. Look, children are born with it. We know they're born with it. That's why they gobble up, like, give me more info, right?
Right. Right.
And
Right.
I think what we do is we come in and arbitrarily drop a wall in front of them and say, no, you have to learn this now, and you have to
Yeah.
learn this now, and it's what we adults want. And all that's gone. All that passion and the world is a beautiful, wonderful place, and I want to learn more, show me everything, it just fades away. And you can see it in their faces. They just get kind of flat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it has to do in a way. I think the root of it is like uh, why we give them education, right?
Yeah.
And so in the Western tradition, we have this called liberal arts,
Mm-hmm.
okay, education. So the reason we call that liberal arts is basically that, I mean, this is like 2,000 years old, right? The tradition is really to teach a free, what basically is what kind of education a free person need,
Right.
right? And to be free and keep free, right? And keep being free and also keep
Right.
your children are free, then what kind of education do you need?
Right.
So that's, uh, I think that's kind of overarching uh, uh, goal, right? And then based on that, we can figure out what can we do to uh, accommodate that.
Sure.
And also each person is different. I mean, that's kind of uh, 4.0, education 4.0 is really focused on each individual because each one, their development uh, is different, right? So like group people by age is really not good. Um, you really, I mean, some people can um, have the aptitude for math. Some are good in writing. You see that they develop. I mean, even our own children, right? They have
Oh, yeah.
developed at the same time. And I think as parents, as educators, is trying to uh, help them to develop.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes you could uh, frustrate the kids because they are not ready yet, and sometimes you could bore a kid because they want to know more, right? And I think that's the home education give them that environment. They can do that,
Yes,
and
exactly.
yeah, I see a mistake some parents does when they homeschool their kids. They are trying to bring in the school into their home,
Yes,
follow the same, right? The
exactly. Yeah,
it,
I've tried
that
to
the
tell people, like, don't recreate school at home. That's why I actually don't love the term homeschooling, because
right,
it still has
right,
the word school.
right.
And so
It's
I'd
not a
kind of
school,
prefer
right?
something like, home-based education or
Right,
something along those lines, because we also aren't always sitting at home.
right,
Very often, I mean, there are some online programs. My kids are in an online program, but for most of what they do. But when they're young, especially when they're young, you want them out in the world. That's how they get that sense of context of like, what,
right,
why am I doing all of this?
right,
And they also meet people and they see, all kinds of things, and,
right.
libraries, museums, so forth. So it's not even happening all at home.
No, definitely
So
not. Yeah, and then
mhm.
that's where you can take them to shop, right? Groceries and all that, and then
It's a
give them
math
some money.
lesson.
Yeah, give them some money to deal with the
Yeah.
dimes and quarters, and kids love that.
They do, yeah, or
Yeah,
you tell them what the budget is walking in, and then ask them to look at the prices and add everything
right,
up in
right,
their heads, or on a piece of paper. I would have my 2 kids were different age, and
right,
so one was able to do things in her head. I told her, I said, "You can round up, but I
right.
want you to make sure that we're within our budget. So round up
Yeah,
and add it up in your head." And
right,
then the other one was sitting and writing on a little piece of paper, like doing her, carry the one,
right,
whatever,
right.
which they don't even teach anymore. So, and they had a great time. They were my helpers.
Right.
It's like, I don't know. Can we get more food? You guys, do I have enough money? So you can make a game out of it. But there, that's something though that people will say, well, Dr. Ping, this all sounds wonderful. And they say it to me all the time, but I have to work. I have to do this, I have to do that. So I understand you're looking at possibly trying to form a school, or you're trying to form a model of a school or something, or am I misunderstanding?
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to actually experiment with like micro school.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically that was kind of a teacher and a dozen students.
Mm-hmm.
And but the teacher's role is more as a guide,
Mm-hmm.
as a coach kind of role.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids are um, so the teachers can guide the student to learn on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very important skill we need to teach to the students, is the ability to learn on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was teaching at my former school, is that most of my students, um, they just wait there. Uh,
Yeah.
you have to teach them. They don't bother to open a book and to read it. To I mean, to they don't even. I don't think they are able to actually study on their own.
No.
So that's kind of sad. I think
Well, and that's why the student-led approach in the public school doesn't work, because you
no,
can't ask a child to do something you've never even shown them how to do, or encouraged them to do, or modeled for them how to do. It's just, like, go teach yourself. Bye. I'll be over here. And you can't, there
no, you
is a
cannot do that.
process and it
Right,
has to start early.
right. Yeah, I mean the student led teaching, whatever. We tried that during the Cultural Revolution. That didn't work.
No.
Yeah, because most kids don't know, right? Especially they don't have a good home environment or
Right.
community environment, so they really cannot. I mean, and also uh, the reason the teachers are trained is really helps them to know more than the student, right? So they can guide the student.
You would hope.
Yeah, you would hope.
Would be the
Right.
goal.
Right. Yeah. So this way, I'm kind of thinking about like people who love to teach. I mean, they're still right, and but then they have their own school, and their interest is tied with the success of the students, right? So they have a stake on the success of students. So that's why
Mhm.
they can uh,
Right.
work. I think fundamentally, like we talk about, that is the how we look at each person, right? From a Christian, uh, uh, Judeo-Christian perspective, is that everyone uh, is a sinner, and also we do work for our own self-interest. And even though there are people who can be selfish and all that, but you cannot count on that as a
Mhm.
society. I mean, that's what capitalism is, right? It's based on that recognition that everybody is working for their own interest, and
Right.
that's actually a good assumption to base on. Instead, that everybody is good, and especially the people on the top are good. The
Right.
central planners, they are, they work for the
And
people,
and
never
I've
work.
learned the hard way that not everyone is even working in their rational self-interest, as we see.
Right, right,
It's very often they're not. They kind of are living in a state of the constant present. In other words, what do I need to do, like, right now? But they forget that to really serve your rational self-interest, you have to think a few steps
right.
ahead
Yeah.
and think about the possible outcomes of your decision.
Right. So in this way, that in this kind of school, like one teacher, 12 kids, you could get more, we get 20, but
Mhm.
still it's more, the teacher is more guide. He's kind of like a coach. He's trying
Sure.
to find out each individual students, their
Mhm.
talents and
Mhm.
their development stage, and then kind of design a kind of like a study plan or curriculum for each individual student. But the students are more or less kind of learn on their own, and
Right.
also you facilitate that. But that's one type of school. You could have other type of schools, but I
Right.
think we need to have those um, for the parents, have those choices out there, right?
Right.
let's get back to like what makes Americans so, I mean, so powerful and so strong, so rich is because we have this free market system, right? And we compete so the
Mhm.
customers can choose. And so if we can provide different choices of the school, I mean, different kind of schools, then that is only good for the parents. So if you cannot
Right.
homeschool, then you can enroll your kids to kind of micro school.
Mhm.
And of course, you can even do like um, homeschool co-ops and all
Right.
that. I think we
Right.
are
So it's like
still
a blend. Yeah.
yeah, we are still kind of in this experimental stage and trying to figure out which one works. And I think you're going to just like any free market, you're going to have you have different uh, uh, companies to serve different needs, right? With different people,
Mhm.
you're going to see all those models out there, and
Right.
I think just well, I hope that I mean I'm trying to because as a teacher and I do know a lot of good teachers who wants to teach. I want to find a way uh, for them if they cannot teach in a public school. What can they do, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Trying to kind of help them create their own. Uh,
Right. And
yeah,
become entrepreneurs in their own
right.
right on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So I want to kind of help us like wrap it all up for the audience and tie it up in a bow. Um, if you were giving advice to parents right now, if somebody's coming to you and saying, Dr. Ping, this is going on my child's school, they're in sixth grade already, et cetera, so forth, and I just don't know what to do. Do you think it is bad enough or dangerous enough for their child, harmful enough that they should really do whatever they can to get them out? Or do you think there's some way to help your child while they're still in the current system?
Uh, I would. Uh, well, it's kind of like if I make a blank kind of statement because there are going
Mhm.
to be
Obviously, there are exceptions, but I'm saying
exceptions all
if
that.
you just had to
Yeah,
generalize,
I
yeah.
will say that just pull your kids out from the public schools, and either homeschool or find a homeschool co-op or and even uh, like right now, if you send them to private school, I still kind of you still want to make sure
Mm.
your child get good education. But
Yeah,
from what I know so far, the best way is just homeschool.
right, because the
Yeah,
NAIS has been captured. So at least 1,600 private schools in America are alright, we know for a fact are
right,
woke,
right,
and then the rest we don't know, you'd have to
right.
investigate,
And
but
and also again, they are based on 3.0, right? It's kind of outdated
exactly. Even the good
model.
ones are still that way.
Right,
But there are
right,
some classical there are a few classical charters I know that are decent. I mean, obviously Hillsdale has their model, so that would be certainly preferable to the standard private school. The challenge, especially for those in rural areas, as I learned the other day from Robert Pondicio, is school choice has no meaning if you live in a rural area.
right.
There's the school. That's it. It's the center of the
Mm,
community. And so it's that or homeschooling. Those are basically your options. And so that's where it can be very challenging. But I still, if someone asked me that question, I'd probably still encourage them to find, some friends and put together a little micro school, put together a
right,
co-op.
right,
And you can do it, or you can find people who can help you,
right.
right, to give you advice. But I was curious because um it's a tough thing, right? People, I'm sure you get asked this question a lot. Well, okay, I've heard you and you make a lot of sense, and now I'm really worried, but what do I do? you know
Yeah,
so now y-
yeah.
you,
To me, it's in a way, it's kind of like a house on fire, right? What are
yeah,
they going to do? Take them out first, then figure out what to do later.
yeah,
And right
right.
now, it's kind of like that, right? The kids are really in harm's way, and
That's
even
right.
before the like the Vogue and the CRT thing, and what I find in school that almost all of them hate the subjects they learned.
Yeah.
So basically, uh, in a way, it's very harmful to their intellectual development. because they are
Very
not
much
going
so.
to, right? They are not going to learn those things anymore because they
Right.
had enough, which is harmful enough. But now it's even worse. Now not only they don't learn anything, they are learning all kind of, uh, sexual orientations and those pornographic materials, and then
Mhm.
they are learning, try to blame the society, blame the parents, and
Right.
they are trying to really, uh, in the name of building a better society, they are being encouraged, to go, to destroy things.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so it
Now,
definitely.
someone in our chat asked earlier, she is in the Indianapolis area, I believe, or in Indiana specifically.
Mm,
Are there in-person places or ways that she can help with this that you know of, or do you know of any people hands-on working on these things, like in your area specifically in Indiana, or
yeah,
anywhere for that matter, but it's specifically
yeah.
in Indiana?
Well, if you need help with homeschooling, I know lady that, I mean, I can. How do I don't know how do I contact that, share the information. I know a lady
Well,
who
what we can
actually.
do is I mean, I can put something, information about how to contact people in your area in the
Mhm.
description box after the show.
Okay.
But I think what she wants to volunteer and make a difference. I think what she's saying is
Oh, okay.
not so much receive help, but give help. Like,
Oh,
how could
wonderful.
she actually do something and, help with this? Because I do get asked that question pretty frequently. I mean, sometimes it's in a particular location, other times it's other areas. People say, I'm retired or I'm semi-retired and I used to teach math, or I'm really good at math, or I'm really good
Right.
at science or history. I love talking about history. What would you recommend I do to get connected with parents who are trying to do what you want them to do? What do you
Yeah.
think they should do right now?
Right. I have a Facebook group. It's called the Micro School Initiative.
Okay.
So, and I think if she can join that group, then we can talk about that. I'm still trying to find the people that we can, work together and make this
Right.
happen.
Right. Because even, this is for the audience. As I just described, if you're a person who has a passion about learning, or maybe you know how to help people with study skills, or you know how to even just do research, one of the things that Dr. Ping is talking about is, if parents want to create a micro school, the first question, aside from how do I find the other people to do it with me, right,
Mm,
is, well, now I want to find a qualified teacher, or I want to find the qualified adults to deal with it. Those qualifications are going to be different than hiring a school teacher. You're
right.
looking for somebody, as he said, who first of all, has a great deal of respect for the learning process and for children, a great deal of respect for parents' goals and rights, and really good at what I would call business analysis, but you're not applying to a business, you're applying to education. Like, what are
Mm,
you looking for? What do you
right.
want? So they're gathering requirements like you would do when you were an engineer, and then really good research skills to go out and find, what? I found a great physics teacher for your senior, your AP physics student. They do operate in a virtual environment. However, I will be here to make sure everything's going okay. I vetted them. I looked at their resume. I looked at their curriculum. It matches your goals. While they're, they can be in class while I'm sitting here at the ready for any questions, or you can do it at home. So it's like you need a consultant who can just help match you. The micro school helps you provide that sort of social environment of, there are other people I'm studying with, and
Right.
I'm
Right.
the teacher provides study tips,
Mm,
study help mostly, but they're individual instructors. If they need instruction, you can find that's
yeah.
everywhere. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
they're all over the place for
Yeah.
specific
And
subjects.
right. I think there also, I know a couple of people who actually help uh, connect parents with teachers.
Right,
So they have those kind of service out there.
right, right.
And also for parents, sometimes parents consider that, well, I'm not qualified to teach and all that. Um, but I always like to say that your kids are not learning anything in public school.
Right. You're more
So
qualified than what they have right now
don't worry
because
about
you know your
qualifications.
child, which
Yeah,
makes you a step ahead of them.
exactly. And also, you know your child. You know the best about your
Yeah,
child,
you know it's
and
best. And
you- right, and also if you can teach them the basic 3 R's, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic, then you are good. You
right,
actually your kids are kind of ahead than most high school graduates, because sadly nowadays most high school graduates, they are basically illiterate.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
are.
but once
Even
I
if
think,
they can decode, I think
right,
people get confused because they're saying, but they can read. I'm like, they can look at a word and tell you what the word says. That doesn't mean they know what the word means. And it
right,
doesn't mean they comprehend everything they just read in context.
right, yeah,
Could be
and
just
I think
words.
nowadays what happens is a lot of students do not have the cultural context to help them understand,
That is
right?
correct.
Because they never in the real world. They just like go to school, then go back home, sleep. So they in the past, people work in the farm, they work in, family business, so they have that context for the knowledge. So
Right.
when they learn something, there's context. Nowadays they don't. They learn something which is totally out of context. They don't
Hmm.
really for instance, like your kids go to shopping with you, right? They know, they feel, they touch the money, they calculate the money, they have that, right? But a lot of kids don't have that.
That's so
Then when
true.
you teach them like math, they just totally out of context to them.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly. So
right.
true.
So yeah, I think I guess to the parents, don't worry. I mean, I think most parents nowadays can teach 3 R's, right? Reading,
I
writing,
agree. And if they
and
have that,
yeah, good.
as you said, they're ahead of the game, and that's what that's the foundation for
Right.
ultimately.
And then kids can learn on their own. I
Exactly.
mean, a lot of people say even today's student, I mean, they don't want to learn in school, definitely. But
Mhm.
they learn anything, right? They learn everything through either social media or YouTube. The
They
kids
learn
know
pretty
how.
fast, and
Yeah,
they're
kids
pretty
learn how.
smart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
they're
just
really
need.
smart
Right,
technologically. It's just they're not culturally, for all the discussion about cultural competency and
right,
cultural literacy, they're actually culturally illiterate in Western culture, in the
right,
culture of reason and logic and the Enlightenment ideals and everything. No, they
right.
have absolutely no idea what any of that is. And that's our problem is they fundamentally they have no knowledge or understanding of what you went through, and I really believe if they did, they would not be so receptive to what's being done to them. They
Right,
would push back
exactly.
instead of embracing it with both hands. So
Yeah,
I think it's this good information.
right.
And your book, I want to make sure, as I said in the beginning, and for those who are tuning in on the replay, just to remind you, the book is Our Children Are Not Prepared. So that's another one that I think would be great to read if you're wondering specifically like what Dr. Ping is talking about not prepared. And then also I want to make sure people follow you on your YouTube channel, which is the Taking Back Education.
Right.
And is there any place else I can direct people to follow your work? You have the Patreon, I think, which is connected to your channel, correct?
Not connect to the channel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do have a Substack.
Oh, you do have a Substack
So,
now. Okay.
yeah,
Okay,
right.
good.
Um,
So that's great. So you can look for Dr. Ping on Substack. I really want to thank you for spending all this time with us today because this is a dense topic. And it is, there, as I said, there are a lot of people who sort of instinctively know something isn't right,
hmm.
but very few people have the courage to put a fine point on it as you have. So very few people they'll say something like, "Well, it's too political. There's too much politics in the classroom, or there's this or there's that, or they're not learning math the right way." So they kind of
Mm,
piecemeal it. And I think what you've done for us today is explain how it's part of a whole philosophical way of looking at education that is the problem, that it's not just the curriculum, it's
right.
the Gramsci, kind of goal of tearing down the world and remaking it in some kind of other way. And that's a message I think people are taking a long time to digest because it's scary,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
it's a really frustrating thing, but here you are and you had to actually live through it in real life. It
Right.
wasn't theoretical. It
Yeah.
wasn't this thing might happen, I'm living it. And we need more people like you. We need more people to tell us the truth. I try to do it myself, but it's almost like we just need more voices more often because they've got millions of them saying what they're saying, and very few of us. So I hope those of you watching today who've heard Dr. Ping will feel more courageous and empowered to go and stand up for yourselves as parents or educators and say some of the same things he's saying.
Right. Yeah. And also, like, I mean, well, first of all, appreciate to give me a chance to talk with you.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Thank you.
also, like, you are you homeschool your kids and all that. I think American parents need to realize that the most important thing is to educate their children.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, their career and making money or have a big house, those are secondary.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean,
very true.
I think there's one thing about the Chinese culture I appreciate, uh, which in a way is kind of similar to the Jewish culture, is that the Chinese parents are willing to sacrifice for their children's education. They can spend all kinds of money so that kids get a better education. I think that in a way, I think just like in America, we got so used to like the government taking care of us. So,
Yeah.
so now they become like, I don't want to spend money on tutoring. I don't want to spend money send them to private school. I think consider everything, right? I mean,
yeah, very
definitely
true.
our children's education. That's where we need to spend money on, or spend our time on, right? The effort
Right.
on.
And they're almost the same thing, because people say, well, I have to go to work so I can get the money. And it's like, well, calculate the opportunity cost
Right.
of sacrificing, what is your child losing rather than gaining? Maybe you have, like you said, a bigger house, or you go on vacation or something, but is that worth it? What
Right.
are because it's not just the bad stuff, it's what they're missing out on. So when
Right.
you eat a steady diet of junk food, it's not just that you're consuming a lot of sugar, which is bad for you. It's that you're missing all of those essential nutrients.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's both sides. And right now, that's what we see with our kids. Is it's not, people say, well, I'll just, deprogram them at home with better ideas. First of all, good luck with that. Second of all, you can't force feed your child good, intellectual nutrition
No.
if they aren't emotionally and mentally prepared to eat it. It's literally
Right.
like trying to get a 13-year-old to eat vegetables.
Right.
You literally can't do it. If they won't do it, they won't do it, and then you're stuck. So if you start early, you don't have to become a tyrant and end up, wrecking your relationship with your kid trying to get them to be healthy. So, yeah, I mean, obviously you and I are in complete agreement on all of this. But I hope sometime in the future we'll have you back and you can update us on what's happening. I hope people watching will go to the Facebook group. Again, that is the Micro School Initiative.
Yeah.
And so if you have help to offer, if you have ideas, if anything, if you need help, go there and join the group and just become part of this movement. Obviously, I also am working on similar things to Dr. Ping,
Yeah.
although at a different level. I'm more at the grassroots, like parent to parent kind of level. But if you need coaching in this regard, even I can help you through my locals community at thereasonwelearn.locals.com. So whatever it takes, let's get it done, right, Dr. Ping?
Right. Exactly. Or just
Make it
one
happen.
last thing, like
Sure.
I'm in the process of writing my second book.
Ooh, good.
It's called A Spectre is Hunting America. So like in the Communist Manifesto, the first sentence is a spectre is hunting Europe, right? And the spectre of communism. And so they didn't even hide it. So it's a
No,
ghost.
it's true.
It's a spirit,
And I
right?
I picture it like the Dementors.
Mm-hmm.
The Dementors. I don't know if you've ever read the book A Wrinkle in Time.
No.
Okay. Well, I commend it to you. It's a
Okay.
children's book, but it's a Newbery Medal winner, and I think you will love it. It's
Okay.
called A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle, and it's sort of sci-fi a little bit. And it was written in the 60s, but the concept is that a father is trapped on a planet where they have, quote, given in. And the thing they've given into is called it. And it basically takes over the minds of people and does their thinking for them. They don't need to make any decisions. They don't need to do anything. They just give over their mind to it. And then they are all, quote, equal. They are
Right.
all, so it's almost like Harrison Bergeron, but like stretched out and expanded on and with some other themes in there. But the descriptions of how it's happening and what's going on in the minds of the people, it gives you chills when you read it, because obviously, it's sort of sci-fi for children, but it's the kind of book children should be reading when they're 10
Right.
years old, because
Right.
it's not heavy-handed and saying bad things are going to happen. It's just this subtle thing in the story that most kids, I'm tutoring some children who are reading it, and they figured it out on their own. Like, no, this is bad. And, they're taking over their mind and they can't think for themselves. And I'm like, very good. That's good. My
Yeah.
done. So, I mean, it sounds like I'm trying to indoctrinate. I'm not trying to indoctrinate. I'm trying to get the children through literature to think about certain kinds of values and concepts that we do want to pass to them, which is the individual thought, is important. And that's the kind of thing that isn't happening in school because they're so busy working on this cultural Marxism piece.
Right.
They don't work on that.
Yeah.
So
And
anyway, I just
I
thought
think
you would like that book.
definitely. And also you said something which I think is very, very, very profound in terms of the way you teach your student. You let them to come up to that conclusion.
Right.
You let them, to make that connection. I think that's what teaching is. But in school, you don't have that. It's always handed down to you. I mean, here is a conclusion, right? Whether or not you like it. But
I asked them to pull out. I said, what, when it's the last chapter where this really started to settle in. And so we're like near the end of the book. And I said, pick out a part of this chapter that really stood out to you, that made you start to understand what's going on with the characters and the story, whatever. And I was so impressed. One is 9 and one is 11. And they actually, the 9-year-old pulled out a paragraph that, I was like hoping, and you're just sitting there like, I wonder what she's going to pick. Right. And she picked out that particular paragraph where they were describing what was going on. And I was so amazed. I said, what do you think that means? And why is she saying that? And she stumbled a little bit at first. And then I asked a couple more questions. And after I asked a couple more questions, she's like, oh yeah. And then like she was thinking as she was going, and then it all came out, and I couldn't help myself. I was like, yes. I actually threw my arms up in the air. And I said, that is great thinking. That is really good thinking. That is, you're really thinking through. And I said, do you think that Charles Wallace would have been allowed to do the thinking you just did? And she's like, no way you would be allowed. And I said, there you go. And so that's how I try to do it. I try to, kind of like little strands, like pull it out. But you have to ask leading questions like, what do you think about this? And elaborate. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Yeah.
But it's not done that much. There's so much more intent on putting an idea. I actually trust in little children. I think they're born individualists, most of them. You see a toddler, they're born individualists. So I trust that when you put truth in front of them, facts, truth, the kinds of principles that we hold dear, they will get there. They will, they'll figure it out. It might take a little time. And if they don't, and I told my locals members yesterday, I said, if they don't come to it on their own, but they were given the tools to discover it on their own later, some other time, that how to study, how to learn. Thomas Sowell himself was a Marxist until he started working for the government.
Right.
And then when he said, hey, this doesn't work in real life.
No.
And this is a genius. This is a man who had so much knowledge in his head. So when you have the tools and you appreciate empiricism, you will still figure it out. You don't have to figure it out day one. So I've told parents, like, don't worry. It's okay if they've gotten some bad idea, but if you give them the foundation for arriving at good ideas and love them through it, let them know that you're not going to change your mind about them because you disagree. You're also modeling the kind of liberty you want them to allow other people.
Right.
That it's okay if we disagree. We have a different, I still love you, but I hold what I hold dear, and I'm not going to change.
Right.
I'm not going to sacrifice that. And no one's modeling that for them either. So at a minimum, you can model that kind of the real kind of diversity and tolerance.
Right. Exactly.
So, but I think like I said, I'm so grateful, and I really hope we can keep in touch ongoing
Yeah, definitely.
and share ideas, because we are committed to the same cause. And I think we're going to get there. I just, it's like anything else, a work in progress, but we just have to keep explaining it, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you
Yeah.
to everyone who shared this time with us. Is there any last thing you want to say, Dr. Ping?
No, well, thank you very much. Thank
Okay,
you.
you're so welcome. Thank you, everybody. Again, the replay will be available immediately, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.